Ferrari just leaked data that could flip the entire grid upside down. We are talking about a car that set the benchmark lap of testing, while hiding a thermal issue that could cost 0.3 per lap. At the same time, two teams are already in serious trouble. One is losing up to 15 km per hour on the straights. The other is struggling just to complete clean runs. And this is happening before the second week of Bahrain testing even begins. If the leaked FIA numbers are accurate, Ferrari might have built the fastest one-lap car on the grid. But it might also be the most fragile. And if Aston Martin and Cadillac do not fix their core issues immediately, their 2026 season could collapse before race 1. Stay with me, because the data behind this leak tells a completely different story than the headlines. Let's start with Ferrari, because this is where the shock truly begins. On pure pace, the SF26 looks like a weapon. Charles Leclerc's headline lap still stands as the benchmark of the entire first week. A 1 minute 34.273 that instantly put Ferrari at the center of the conversation. But it is not just about one lap. Leaked GPS overlays suggest that through medium and high-speed corners, Ferrari is generating aerodynamic load levels that even Red Bull has not consistently matched. The car rotates aggressively. It carries speed with confidence. It looks alive. On low fuel, it feels like a pole position machine. And that is exactly why the leaked FIA data caused such a stir. Because hidden inside that performance is a serious weakness. The thermal issue. Lewis Hamilton's stoppage on the final day was not random. It was reportedly linked to a structural overheating problem. The packaging around the radiators appears extremely tight. Too tight for Bahrain conditions. Reports indicate that the new Ferrari power unit is rejecting significantly more heat than predicted in simulation, especially around the inverter and battery systems. That forces Ferrari to open additional cooling outlets. And when you open cooling, you add drag. And when you add drag, you lose lap time. The estimate circulating inside the paddock is roughly 0.3 per lap in aerodynamic loss when the cooling bodywork is fully opened. 0.3. In modern Formula 1, that can move you from pole to third row. So here is Ferrari's dilemma. Close the bodywork and risk overheating. Open it and sacrifice performance. That is not a small balance issue. That is a structural design compromise. And it gets even more complex. There is a genuine setup divergence between Hamilton and Leclerc. Hamilton reportedly wants changes to rear suspension geometry because the active aero system creates an unpredictable balance shift under braking. Leclerc, on the other hand, is comfortable with that instability. He uses it to rotate the car. So Ferrari faces two parallel battles. One against heat. One inside the garage. For week 2, they are expected to bring an emergency revised engine cover. Less aerodynamically efficient, but safer for race distance. And here is the key moment. If Ferrari completes a full race simulation without lifting the bodywork, without temperature alarms, without intervention, then the entire grid will take them seriously as title contenders. If they fail again, the narrative changes instantly. Fast but fragile. Explosive but unreliable. And in Formula 1, fragile cars rarely win championships. But while Ferrari walks that tightrope, two teams are not balancing anything. They are simply trying to survive. Let's talk about the first team in real danger. Aston Martin. Because while Ferrari is fighting to control heat, Aston is fighting to control the car itself. The early numbers were brutal. Some internal comments suggested a gap of 4 seconds to the front. Even if that figure is exaggerated, analysts still place the real deficit somewhere between 1.5 to 2 seconds. In modern Formula 1, that is not a small step back. That is a different category. The problem begins with philosophy. The AMR26 was designed with an aggressive size 0 concept around the Honda power unit. Tight packaging. Extreme bodywork. Minimal cooling margins. On paper, it looked innovative. On track, it looks suffocated. But the real crisis is electrical. Reports indicate the Honda power unit is experiencing energy clipping on the long straights of Sakhir. That means the battery cannot sustain deployment under the new 2026 rules. Halfway down the straight, the electrical boost fades. And when that happens, the car loses up to 15 km per hour compared to the leaders. 15 km per hour is enormous. That is not aerodynamic fine-tuning. That is power loss. And power loss cannot be masked with setup changes. Engineers have reportedly flown in emergency support from Japan, bringing software patches for week 2. But if the limitation is hardware-based, if the battery capacity or recovery system is fundamentally insufficient, then there is no quick fix. And the mood reflects that reality. Inside the garage, frustration is growing. Fernando Alonso is said to be visibly disappointed after the final day of week 1. Because this was supposed to be a reset year. A new era. a competitive leap. Instead, they are fighting just to complete clean stints. And that brings us to the second team in serious trouble: Cadillac. Their arrival was marketed as a bold American statement in Formula One. Momentum, ambition, expansion of the grid. But early testing has exposed how unforgiving this sport can be. Cadillac is not just lacking pace. They are struggling with correlation, cooling inconsistencies, gearbox stress under torque load, unstable aerodynamic balance during longer runs. The car looks unpredictable. And in testing, unpredictability is the worst sign. Because testing is where you solve problems quietly. If you cannot gather clean data, you cannot improve. And if you cannot improve before race 1, the deficit compounds immediately. While Ferrari debates drag versus temperature, and Aston debates survival versus redesign, Cadillac is still trying to establish a baseline. That is a dangerous place to be. Because week 2 will not be gentle. Fuel loads will increase. Race simulations will begin. Real qualifying pace will be revealed. There will be no more conservative programs. No more hiding. And if Aston Martin still fades at the end of straights, and Cadillac continues fighting basic integration, the gap to the front will not shrink. It will widen. So while the headlines scream about Ferrari's potential title charge, the deeper story might be about who is already falling behind. Because in a brand new regulation era, the first weeks matter more than ever. Momentum builds fast. But so does damage. And once the season starts, there is no reset button. Now step back and look at the grid as a whole. Because what makes this moment so dramatic is contrast. Ferrari might have built the fastest one-lap car in Bahrain. Aston Martin might have built a car that cannot sustain full power down a straight. Cadillac might still be fighting basic stability. And week 2 will expose all of it. Testing week 1 is always controlled. Fuel loads are unknown. Engine modes are conservative. Programs are experimental. But week 2 is different. That is when teams simulate qualifying. That is when they run full race distances. That is when cooling packages are stress-tested in the afternoon heat. And this is where Ferrari's story becomes critical. If they complete one uninterrupted race simulation without opening the bodywork, without lifting off, without temperature alarms, the message to the grid will be clear. They are real. Not just quick over one lap. Not just impressive on headlines. Real championship contenders. But if the thermal issue returns, if the engine cover comes off mid-run, if the power delivery must be dialed back, then the entire narrative shifts. Fast but fragile. Explosive but unsustainable. And championships are not won with fragility. At the same time, Aston Martin faces a different kind of pressure. They are not trying to confirm dominance. They are trying to avoid humiliation. If the energy clipping persists, if they continue losing massive speed at the end of the straight, rivals will attack them easily in race trim. Defending becomes impossible. Strategy becomes irrelevant. Because you cannot defend without power. And for Cadillac, week 2 is about credibility. Not podiums. Not headlines. Credibility. Can they run consistently? Can they correlate wind tunnel data with track performance? Can they solve cooling and gearbox stress before race 1? Because if they enter the season still experimenting, the gap to the midfield will grow immediately. And here is the deeper implication. In a brand new regulation era, the first impression matters more than ever. Momentum shapes development direction. Confidence shapes risk-taking. A team that starts strong invests aggressively. A team that starts in crisis becomes conservative. And conservative teams rarely close big gaps. That is why this moment feels bigger than just testing times. Ferrari's potential. Aston Martin's crisis. Cadillac's growing pains. All unfolding before a single championship point is awarded. Week 2 in Bahrain will not just reveal speed. It will reveal structure. Who built a foundation? Who built a compromise? And who built a problem? Because once the season begins, there is no hiding. And the grid will remember exactly how this story started. And here is the part most people are not talking about. Pressure changes behavior. If Ferrari proves in week 2 that the cooling fix works, that the revised engine cover survives a full race distance, something shifts inside Maranello. Confidence grows. Development becomes aggressive. Risks feel justified. And when Ferrari feels confident, they push harder than anyone. But if the thermal alarms return, if Hamilton or Leclerc are forced to lift again, internal tension will rise instantly. Because remember, there is already a philosophical split in setup direction. 2 elite drivers. 2 different preferences. 1 narrow operating window. If the car becomes temperature sensitive and balance sensitive at the same time, frustration multiplies. And frustration inside a title project is dangerous. Now look at Aston Martin from another angle. If week 2 shows no progress, the conversation changes from performance to leadership. Because this was supposed to be the beginning of a new era. New structure. New technical direction. Long-term ambition. If the car cannot even sustain full electrical deployment down a straight, questions will be asked about integration decisions. About concept philosophy. About whether the size zero ambition was worth the risk. And when those questions start publicly, confidence drops internally. Drivers feel it. Engineers feel it. Investors feel it. Momentum swings negative. For Cadillac, the situation is even more fragile. They are new. They are under scrutiny. Every mechanical issue becomes amplified. Every missed lap becomes a headline. If they stabilize in week 2, even without pace, the narrative becomes patience. Growth. Foundation building. But if instability continues, if reliability remains inconsistent, the story becomes unprepared. And that label is hard to remove in Formula One. Meanwhile, other teams are watching quietly. Red Bull has not shown everything. There are whispers they are holding back real qualifying pace until the final day of testing. McLaren has been methodical, consistent, almost invisible in drama. And sometimes the quietest team in testing becomes the most dangerous when the lights go out. So here is the bigger picture. Ferrari might have shocked the grid with raw speed. But speed alone does not win championships. Aston Martin might be struggling with power delivery. But power can be recalibrated if the architecture allows it. Cadillac might be overwhelmed by complexity. But complexity can be simplified if the fundamentals are strong. The question is which of these problems are superficial, and which are structural. Week 2 will begin to answer that. Because once race simulations are complete, once qualifying runs are pushed to the limit, once engines run at full temperature for extended stints, there will be nowhere to hide. And when the paddock leaves Bahrain, the grid hierarchy will be clearer than ever. Not final, but clearer. Ferrari's leak may have shocked the grid. But the real shock might be what happens when those numbers are tested under full race conditions. Because in Formula One, potential means nothing without proof. And proof is coming.